Yes, family. So our next speaker is the renowned Runoko Rashidi, the anthropologist and historian, who, has a major focus on what he calls the global African presence. Africans outside of Africa, before and after enslavement. He's the author and editor of 18 books, the most recent of which are My Global Journeys in Search of the African Presence and Asata, Garvey and Me, A Global African Journey for Children in 2017. He's got a whole range of other works, but most notably, he's the master teacher of Black history prior to the colonizers entering Africa. So without further ado, let's hear from Runoko Rashidi.
Well, good morning. It's morning for me. I'm in Los Angeles. It's 10 o'clock. I think where you are, it's pretty much late in the afternoon or evening. Anyway, thank you for having me. And give thanks to Brother Tony for that presentation. I learned a lot. What I'm going to try to do, God willing, is to do a shortened version of a much longer presentation, and it'll be a visual presentation. So you'll have to make me a co-host or enable me to show the photographs and we can get started. Here we are. Now you have a choice and you can pick one or the other. We can deal with ancient history, particularly the Nile Valley. We could do a little bit of the Nile Valley. In fact, I've already made up my mind. We'll do a little bit of the Nile Valley, and then we'll move on and show the African presence in other parts of the world. Let's do that.
Yes, sir.
I want to choose that one too.
Indeed.
No, I hate it when somebody asks me, what do you think? And then tells me what they're going to do. And that's just what I did. So we can start in the Nile Valley. And this is in the latter period of it. It's my belief that the worst thing you can do is to teach a child that their history began with slavery. Now, there's a brother from the Caribbean named Stokely Carmichael who changed his name to Kwame Ture. And before I met John Henry Clark and Ivan Van Sertima and Dr. Ben and so many others, he was my teacher before I became a historian as an activist. And he would always say, if you think you began your history with slavery, the best you will hope to be is a good slave. And that doesn't mean, obviously, that we should not talk about enslavement and we should not talk about colonization, but I never start there. And when we do talk about it, I want to do what others are doing, and that is talk about resistance to enslavement. That's not to minimize the suffering of our ancestors, but we did more than suffer. We fought back and we resisted. And I think that the sisters that you're honoring today and who are presenting today are a part of that tradition. So hopefully this will just kind of set the tone. This takes us to what is traditionally called the 25th dynasty of Kemet, or ancient Egypt. Kemet is the indigenous name. It means the black city or the black community. And during this particular period of time, about 700 BC, you have Africans from south of Kemet, from a place called Kush and Nubia, who came forth. Kemet was in disarray, and they developed an African empire that stretched from Khartoum and what is now Sudan to Jerusalem and what is now Israel. In this portion of the African world, women were particularly important. And the sister that you're looking at now, by the way, this photograph is at the Fitzwilliam Museum at Cambridge University. Her name is Amanirdis, and I can argue that she was the most powerful woman in the world at that time. Not the most powerful Black woman, the most powerful woman on earth. Now, in the process of doing this presentation or organizing it, which is actually called Black Women in History and Art, a much longer presentation, I did take a global approach. Naturally, I spent a lot of time in the Nile Valley and other parts of Africa, and then I went around the world, and not just to the United States and the Caribbean. But when I say around the world, I'm talking about ancient Europe, Asia, Australia, even ancient America. And I couldn't find a single woman of stature. Nobody whose name is a historical figure, or very, very, very few. Whereas in Africa at this time, women are leading nations. They're founding dynasties. They're actually leading troops into battle. and as a secure, heterosexual alpha male, black man, I'm secure enough in my manhood to be able to acknowledge the power and majesty and splendor of African women. And I think that black women need to hear that from brothers in particular, because in many cases we've dropped the ball. All right, this is Amanita. Let me show you these slides. And here she is again. This is actually in front of her tomb. This is her successor. Her name is Wepet II. This is in Berlin. One of the reasons I enjoyed coming to Europe so much, and the UK as well, it's really one of my favorite places, to be honest with you, is because of the museums there. They are repositories of loot, and a lot of our stuff is there. These are powerful women who lived 2,700 years ago. Yours truly, Runoko Rashidi, standing in front of what I thought was their chapel at a place called Medinet Habu on the west bank of the Nile in Kemet, but actually it's a chapel, but it's also their tomb. They were actually buried there. I didn't realize that until my last trip to Egypt in November of 2019. This is a sister from the end of the dynasties, dynasty 25, actually, the end of the Kushite dynasty. And then this very powerful piece is not a queen per se. She is, I guess we could call a queen mother, if you want to use the African tradition. Her name is Credonk, and she is the mother of arguably the greatest man in the ancient world. His name is Imhotep. Now, most of the images of Imhotep that I've had historically, and I've been doing this work for a long time, most of the images of Imhotep that we have are very small. I think that they were put in tombs of ordinary people, not just the kings and the queens. Long after his death, 2,000 years after his death, he is given a kind of a status of a deity. But the images are so small, it's very hard to distinguish his racial characteristics, his ethnic features. Imhotep is called the father of medicine. He's the first architect that we know of. He is many, many, many things. He's a bad brother. But what I did find years ago was this image of the mother of Imhotep. And you can look at her and see that there's no doubt that this is an African woman. It's unfortunate that we have discussions about the racial makeup of photographs of some sisters from the Omo Valley in Ethiopia. All the pictures I'm going to show you are all original pictures. These are all photographs that I took myself, and I'm very proud of that. So this presentation gives me an opportunity to showcase some of my work for you. This sister is in the Omo Valley in Ethiopia, and I wanted to just share, you can see what I think is a strong physical similarity, and then here's yet another. This sister's from a community called the Hamar, and one more, that's ochre in her hair. I don't think we talk about ancient Egypt. I don't think we talk about the ancient Nile Valley too much. I think we do a better job is connecting the ancient Nile Valley with the rest of Africa. I think that's really where the challenge lies. And of course, this is Cleopatra right here. It's not long ago revealed in the UK that she had an African ancestor. And the images that I'm going to show you now, and I know they're not the best, but it's the best we've got, are from Kush itself, actually a part of Sudan called Merowe. You have 4 major kingdoms in what is now Sudan. First, you have one called the Kingdom of Tasseti, and that means the land of the bow. That's the first kingdom in the Nile Valley that we know, even before Kemet. And then we have one called the Kingdom of Kerma. That's from around 2500 BC to about 1500 BC. And then you have the Kingdom of Kush, which a lot of people also call the Kingdom of Napata. And then you have a 4th one after that, and that is Merowe, or some people call it Mero, but it's actually Merowe. And Merowe, what stands out about it in particular is the role of the Queen Mother, and they are called Candaces. The Romans Latinized that and they call her Candace. This is one, I hope you can see at least the outline. One of the most powerful ones that we know of, her name is Amani Sheketo. And here she is sitting on a throne in Khartoum, Sudan, in the National Museum there. And behind her is her son, the prince. Here's another similar example. This is in Aswan in Nubia. Aswan, the capital of Egyptian Nubia. This is in the British Museum. Now there's a place with a lot of our stuff, believe me. And you can see that these are, at least in this case, this is a full-figured sister. In many of the images that you see from Kemet itself, the women are very thin, but these sisters took up space. This is another one of Amani Shikato. This is in, I believe it's in Munich, Germany. It's either Munich or Berlin. Countries that took the most out of Kush or Nubia, I'll use those words interchangeably, are Germany, Italy, and the UK. And this is her jewelry. This is the jewelry of Amani Shikato, and those look like cowrie shells down there on the bottom. This is an armlet. Nubia also means the land of gold, and it was wealthy in gold, to the point that gold wasn't really that valuable. Silver had a higher value than gold. So these are just, I shouldn't say just, these are Kandakas, or perhaps goddesses from ancient Meroe. And this one I really love. This one is not on public display. This was in a special exhibit, and the United States took a lot too, believe me. A special exhibit at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. And it was on display, I believe, in November, December of last year. And I was able to go to Boston and see it. And what you have here is what appears to be a Kandaka, a queen mother, seated on a throne or a bench. And next to her are the two most powerful female aspects of God in the ancient Nile Valley. This is Heru, the house of Heru, a goddess of love, beauty, and sensuality. A goddess, you could say, that personified femininity. I say goddess out of habit, but I really like to say aspect of God, because I think our ancestors always understood that God was one, but with many aspects and manifestations and many names. And then on the other side is Aset. The name Aset means the throne. The world knows her as Isis. And to have this sister sitting in the middle with this heavy necklace, it's very powerful to me. Now, this is not to minimize the status of African men, but one of the things that stands out in the ancient Nile Valley is that the brothers were so secure, they were not threatened by even the strongest Black woman. And these are the places where those sisters are buried. A lot of these pyramid tombs have not been identified, but we know that Kandakas were buried in there. And this is north of the city of Khartoum. This is one of my favorite places to visit. I've been able to take 2 groups to Sudan, and I love it there. And you're in this soft, powdery sand, and there's hardly no tourists. Sudan has the remains of more than 300 pyramids. Kemet has the remains of about 125. Now let's leave the Nile Valley. As much as I hate to go, here we are going. And this one takes us to Ethiopia. The purpose of this is just to kind of show, when I do these presentations, is just to show that civilization was not confined, wow, I better pick up the pace, to the ancient Nile Valley, because I know I'm not going to be able to cover all that I want to. But one of the places where you have an ancient civilization in Africa is called Aksum, and Aksum is in part of what we now call Ethiopia. And this is a queen, apparently seated on the throne. Notice the short cropped hair. This is in the National Museum in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. There it is from the side. When I go in a museum and I have the opportunity, I take photographs from as many different angles as possible. We're trying to document our history. And I think that there are enough artifacts in these museums, including European museums, that we can document in large measure, the entire history of the ancient world, as far as African folk are concerned. This one takes us to Carthage. Now, Carthage is in North Africa, is in what is now Tunisia. And the Carthaginians, led by a man named Hannibal in particular, fought the Romans for centuries. Unfortunately, ultimately, the Africans were defeated, and Carthage was eradicated by the Romans. They felt a great threat from the Carthaginians. And eventually it was rebuilt as a Roman city. So very few things have survived from there. And this is, I think, the best piece that I'm aware of. This is in the Bardo Museum in Tunis, Tunisia. There it is side by side. This is a sister, and I've got a mental blank. I think it's Yemen Ya. I could be wrong. This is in Burkina Faso. And that tells you the fact that the name happens to escape me, that whenever I do a presentation, I add a lot of different things. And sometimes, you know, I'm not as organized as I could be. But anyway, this is a warrior queen in Burkina Faso. In fact, the capital, Ouagadougou. And then here's one we all know about, or at least we should know about. This is a statue of Ya Asantewaa. Ya Asantewaa is a queen mother of the Ajisu clan of the Asante Nation. One of the things we have to emphasize is that the European conquest or subjugation of Africa was not a walkover. These Africans resisted. Whenever there's injustice, there's resistance. And one of the great resistance leaders is this sister, this ancestor named Ya Asantewaa. This is a relatively new statue of her on a roundabout as you enter the city of Kumasi, which is the heart of the Asante Kingdom. Now, the Asante in northern Ghana, or north central Ghana, fought 3 titanic wars against the British called the Anglo-Asante Wars. And one of them is known as the Ya Asantewaa War. Apparently, she felt that the brothers weren't being aggressive enough. And so she rallied, she gave a big speech, it's come down in history, and basically said, if the men won't fight the British, if the brothers won't get out and fight, the women will. And they organized another war. Unfortunately, the Africans lost, and Ya Asantewaa herself was exiled. This one takes us to another part of the world that the British played a very important role. And this bust right here, which is in the Museum of Men in Paris, is of Truganini. And Truganini was the last full-blood Tasmanian native or aboriginal, indigenous people of Tasmania. Tasmania is an island about the size of Ireland off the southeast coast of Australia. And around 1803, it was established as a British prison settlement. Most of the sisters and brothers there, probably known as Palawa, there are 2 groups, one is called the Palawa, lived in peace and harmony for thousands of years. And within 100 years, within 75 years actually, all of the full-bloods were dead. I used to write way back in the 90s that all of these sisters and brothers have been wiped out. That is not true. And for those of us who are saying that all the Tasmanian Aboriginals are gone, we need to stop as of today. I went to Tasmania, I went to Australia, and I met with their descendants. And they are deeply offended when we write that they perished, even though that's what most of the books indicate. There are books called Black Death, The Extermination of the Tasmanian Aborigines. There's a book called Last of the Tasmanians. But what happened was that British seal hunters in the 19th century captured indigenous women in Australia and used them as sexual slaves. And children were born from those unions. So you do have a highly mixed group of indigenous people there. And those are the ones that I've been able to meet with. This sister had a horrible existence. I mean, people raped, cut in half, butchered, used, decapitated, enslaved, hunted, used for dog food. That is the fate, in large measure, of our sisters and brothers in Tasmania and Australia. Her name is Truganini. And as hard as I tried, I couldn't come up with a name of a sister, or any woman for that matter, in the history of Asia. We know, in ancient Asia at least, we know that Asia was first inhabited by Black folk. Like the world was, humanity began in Africa, and those Africans scattered to the far corners of the earth. We know that. But I couldn't find the name or an image, better yet, of a sister in the history of Asia, so I got a goddess. It's the next best thing. And this is a goddess from a civilization in Vietnam called the Cham civilization, existed 1,000 years ago. Her name is Uma, U-M-M-A. She's the goddess of peace and serenity. This is in a museum in Da Nang, Vietnam. A few more minutes. Takes us back to the most ancient phases of Europe. This one is called the Venus of Willendorf. It's a soapstone statue, only a few inches high. It's about 25,000 years old. It shows a full-figured, happy-to-be-nappy-haired sister in Europe 25,000 years ago. She's so important that she has a special room dedicated to her in the Natural History Museum in Vienna, Austria. That's the museum. And that little piece of this Black woman who lived in Europe 25,000 years ago is the centerpiece. It's the primary attraction in this museum in Vienna. Now this one takes us to, we're still in the UK, and this one takes us to the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford. This is a depiction about 2,500 years old of Andromeda. The Andromeda Galaxy is named after a Black woman. According to Greek mythology, Andromeda was the daughter of the king and queen of Ethiopia. And she married a man named Perseus, the Greek hero, and they are the parents. Perseus, by the way, is the one who slayed the Medusa, the Gorgon. And they are supposed to produce a son named Perses, who is the basis of the historical country of Persia. Also in the UK, I didn't realize so many were from there. This is another sister in Greek mythology. This is Circe. This is in the British Museum. Circe is supposed to have given poison to the Greek hero Ulysses or Odysseus. Just beautiful cameos of African women. This is from Italy, the 16th century. Back in the UK, in York, you have the remains of a sister called the Ivory Bangle Lady. The Ivory Bangle Lady was a Black woman, an African woman who lived in York, England about 1,600 years ago. Her father may have been an African general in the Roman army. They found her tomb, and she's called the Ivory Bangle Lady because you have ivory bangles found in her tomb. She was a wealthy sister. And of course, a controversial figure, I suppose, for some. This is Queen Charlotte Sophia, or Sophia Charlotte, the Queen of England at the time of the American Revolution, the ancestor, I guess, of the current queen. And there was an abolitionist painter, a European, a white man, an Englishman, who painted a number of portraits of her that give the impression that she was of mixed African heritage. The tradition is that she had Moorish ancestry. And then the image of the African and European art. Of course, this sister, I think this one is simply called the Negress. And this is in Leipzig, Germany. And this is a bound African woman. You can see the rope around her, but she has a look of great defiance. Let me just go through a few more quickly and I'll call it a day. In Portugal, this beautiful one called the African Venus, which we see in many museums around the world. Looks like Lauryn Hill. Another beautiful piece. And then you have people like Saartjie Baartman. Now, Saartjie Baartman, this is a bust of her in the Museum of Man in Paris, is also known as the Hottentot Venus. And this is a sister from Southern Africa, a Namakoi woman, so-called Hottentot, who was talked into coming into Europe around 240 or so years ago and told basically, if you're willing to put your body on display, you can become famous, you can make a lot of money. And she was taken advantage of. Terrible things happened to this sister. And then finally, the Americas, a figure, one of the rare figures of a woman from the Olmec world. The Olmec are important to us because they represent the first or the parent civilization of the Americas. And these are from the colonial period. This sister looks like she's looking at this milky white woman as if to say, damn it, I didn't put enough poison in this melon because this person's supposed to be out. Gone. Anyway, I'll leave that. An African saint in Peru, Saint Iphigenia. Carlotta Lucami, bad sister, who attempted to lead a revolt in Matanzas province in Cuba in 1843. She is called Carlotta Lucami. And then Solitude, an African woman who was captured and raped aboard the ship and fought with the revolutionaries in Guadeloupe. This is the same time as the Haitian Revolution. Unfortunately, these sisters and brothers were defeated and led by a brother named Louis Delgray, 300 of them decided not to be returned to slavery, and they blew themselves up. Well, there was a sister on their side who was captured, and she is called Solitude. The French captured her and they executed her the day the baby was born. They waited until she gave birth to the child. I used to think that was humane, but now I think they just wanted another commodity. This is Sister Solitude. And then Harriet Tubman conducted the Underground Railroad in the United States. And we could go on and on. I think maybe I'll end with this one. This because it relates to the British as well. This is a statue in Hamilton, Bermuda, and her name is Sally Bassett. And the British burn her at the stake because they accused her in the 16th century of having given poison to the other enslaved Africans. She denied it, but they made an example of her. So what I've tried to do, sisters and brothers, is to briefly take you around the world, show you a few images of African women in antiquity into modern times, focus on resistance to injustice, oppression, colonization, enslavement, and try to pave the way for what is going to happen for the rest of the day. And this is my way of paying tribute and honoring Black women. I love Black women. And I think Black women and Black men, when we come together, we make a powerful combination. And that is the basis of all things in terms of progress and empowerment. I don't hate anybody, but I love Black people. And I have an undying love for Black women. And that's something I'm very, very proud of. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you for that, Baba Runoko Rashidi. It is an honor and a pleasure to host the master teacher in an arena such as this. I'm going to take, if you got a few minutes to stay with us, Baba Runoko, a couple questions for you, because we have a bit of time, if I may. All right, the hands are up already, so I'm going to take Brother Makapi Selassie. Greetings, Uncle, from Birmingham.
Yeah, greetings, Shakara, and each and every one.
Blessings.
Yeah, give thanks, Runoko Rashidi, for a brilliant presentation. My question is a simple one. There was an image of the three women seated throned, and it gave the name of Eteru and Aset, but the middle one wasn't named. I just want to know the name of the middle.
Because the middle one, and now I see the ambassador has joined us. What an honor just to be able to look at her on the screen. It makes my day, and I'll be telling everybody that the ambassador saw at least a little bit of my presentation. What a big deal. The reason I didn't give her name is because two things. First, we don't know her name. That's the big one.
Okay.
And number two, she is an actual mortal woman. She's like the ambassador. She's tough, she's bad, she's super, but the others were I don't want to use the word mythological, but they represented that they weren't actual humans. So you have the goddess Eru, the house of Eru, and then you have Aset, and then you have the unnamed or unknown Queen Mother of Kandaka sitting in the middle. Does that clarify that?
Yes, give thanks.
Give thanks, Uncle. Right, if you want to ask a question, family, please click the raise your hand button in the chat. Click the raise your hand button in the chat. And we also want to officially, as gotkushTV, welcome Ambassador Arikana Chihombori Kwao to the proceedings. And we hope that you enjoy, you know what I'm saying, in observation before you speak. It's an honor to host you, Auntie, so we give thanks for your presence. If anybody would like to ask a question to Baba Runoko Rashidi, please feel free to hit the raise your hand button in the chat. While they're doing that, Baba Runoko, you mentioned the presence in Tasmania, and I know you've been a lot of places. Yeah, what is your understanding of the extent to which Black people in other parts of the world actually actively affirm a connection to Africa?
Oh, that's too broad a question. You have to go country to country to country.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, go.
Because you have different movements and different migrations. Mm-hmm. Let's use India as an example. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You have Black people who come out of Africa as the first people to settle in India. And then you have a role of African people or Black people who are in the Indus Valley civilization, okay? And then you have sisters and brothers now called CDs or Hapshis who came to India within the last 1,000 years, some of them as enslaved people. And then you have African students and diplomats who are in India today. And so I think that there's a tendency to lump all these sisters and brothers together as though they are one, and they are not, and they are monolithic. So a question like that is almost impossible. Let me say something about Australia. I've been in Australia a bunch of times, and I've been over there with the sisters and brothers. I have a colleague over there who gave me some real documentation. He told me, and I saw an article written about it, that Marcus Garvey himself, before he was railroaded by the FBI, had planned to go to Australia and meet with the indigenous people there. Garvey kept in touch with them, that there was a Garvey-like organization founded in Australia in 1937, that there was a Black Panther Party in Australia, that there were freedom rides and sit-ins. And so I think that what is very important is that we link these struggles together. In the United States, for example, we talk about the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Power movement, and rarely make a connection with Black liberation movements that were occurring at the same time. Martin Luther King, who went to Jamaica and paid tribute to Garvey, also was in Ghana on March 6, 1957, when it became independent, as a guest of Kwame Nkrumah. Dr. King carefully monitored the African liberation movement. So I think we make a great mistake when we separate these movements of African people. My belief is we're fighting one war with many battlefields.
Thank you very much, Baba. Right, we've got 2 questions. We're going to take those 2, and then we're going to move on. Brother Nat, your hand was raised first.
Yes, well, first of all, greetings to everyone. Respect and honours to the presenters, and most importantly to Ambassador Arikana. Looking forward to nation building with our Mama Ambassador Arikana. My question, I wanted to put it to Brother Tony Warner, but just as relevant to Brother Runoko Rashidi, and to give thanks for giving clarity to the history. It's quite simply, for a starting point for anyone, where would you say would be, or what would be your top 3 Black women in history, which we would go to? First of all, I know it's a bit, but just like, if you've been nowhere,
how do you answer a question like that, brother?
Give me your top 3.
First of all, 3. Our ambassador, who is sitting there with us today. And then I would point to another sister in history, and that is Anne Nzinga. This is the African woman who fought against the expansion of enslavement in what is now Angola and Central Africa hundreds of years ago. And then, of course, you can find somebody from the Nile Valley. For example, Makare Hatshepsut, who is actually a female king, one of the most powerful women in the ancient world. But it's impossible to narrow it down to 3. So I'll just say that those 3 right there are representative of great Black women in history, and leave it at that.
Good, thanks.
Thank you very much, Brother Nat. Uday Chaz, Farthing Neverfield. I'm going to try and take you, but we do have to move on soon, yeah. So I'm going to go to Uday Chaz first.
Hello, thank you. Oh, I just put my thing on. Thank you. A wonderful presentation so far.
Thank you.
What I would like, you showed an image, a jewelry of Imhotep's mother, Khepra Ankh, with cowrie shells. Can you show that again, please?
No, well, it's too late to do it now.
Oh.
But if you send me an email, I'll send you a copy. Anybody can contact me at runoko@hotmail.com, RUNOKO@hotmail.com. But it's technically, we don't have the ability to go, and the time to go back and do that. You're actually, I think, talking about 2 images. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is the jewelry of Amani Sheketo with the cowrie shells. Yes?
Yes, that's
it takes us back to about 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
It's in a museum in Munich, Germany. Again, the Germans took a great deal, and it's from her tomb. And it has what appears to be on the bottom cowrie shells. And that is what I was saying, that it's very important that we link the Nile Valley up with the rest of Africa and take it out of this vague nebulous place called the Middle East. And then it's had another question as well.
No, that was the only one I wanted.
All right, okay, good, that was easy. Email me.
Thank you.
All right, true to that was short and sweet. Farthing Neverfield, we'll take yours and then we'll move on.
Hello.
Greetings.
Yes, brother.
Thank you very much, Baba Runoko Rashidi. That was a very interesting masterpiece, history talk. But there is something I actually would want to understand, and that is for which, why is it a problem for my Caribbean, Pacific, and other Black brothers outside the African continent find it difficult to reconnect and join hands in building this particular struggle for which we found ourselves. I happen to be a youth leader in the African Caribbean Pacific Diaspora Support Service. And each time I kind of see that there is a disconnect. You know, I saw the lady who asked the question about the Caribbean women. The Caribbean women are African women. The Pacific women are African women. Sometimes when I meet them on the road, I don't even say they're Caribbeans or Pacific. I say they're African brothers because they were taken away some century back. So my problem is why even in the US, as the case may be, why even in the UK, in the US, why is it a problem for the diaspora to connect to its roots?
Two reasons. One is, and this is the most important thing, we've always been told we're not African. Those Africans don't like you. They don't think you're African. They think they're better than you, except that is drilled in us 24/7, that Africans do not relate to African Americans. We are taught that all the time. Number two, because people, I think, because of the way Africa is projected, the image of Africa that we get consistently is poverty, disease, and corruption. That's the overwhelming images. So many African Americans do not want to identify that. What we need is a different image of Africa, which I try to provide. Africa is the birthplace of humanity. Africa, the birthplace of civilization. But also we need a dose of love from the motherland itself. We need to hear from the continent that you care about us. Imagine what it would be like if one African head of state would speak out against these police shootings of Black men in the United States. We'd go crazy. That's the kind of love and propaganda that we need. I'll say this and I'm done because I know we're out of time and I'm just getting warmed up. Last week, we lost this brother, Chadwick Boseman, great actor, great brother. He was in the film Black Panther. Hundreds of thousands, millions of African Americans went to see that film because it showed a different image of Africa. And in spite of 400 years of captivity, we are still in our souls and our heart African people. So think about it now. Give us some love. Work with me, Runoko@hotmail.com, and we'll see what we can do to begin to accelerate the acceptance of Africans in the diaspora for Africa. Marcus Garvey said, Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. Up, you mighty race. You can accomplish what you will. Thank you, brother, for having me.
Thank you, Baba Runoko Rashidi. It's a pleasure to have you, my Baba, not only because you are Runoko Rashidi, but because you're a fellow Garveyite and member of the UNIA ACO. So it's a pleasure to host you, Baba Runoko.